Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Wadier.
And I'm Tommy Welling, and you're listening to the Fasting for Life podcast.
This podcast is about using fasting as a tool to regain your health, achieve ultimate wellness, and live the life you truly deserve.
Each episode is a short conversation on a single topic with immediate actionable steps. We cover everything from fat loss and health and wellness to the science of lifestyle design.
We started Fasting for Life because of how fasting has transformed our lives, and we hope to share the tools that we have learned along the way. Hey everyone, welcome to the Fasting for Life podcast. My name is Dr. Scott Wadier, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend and colleague, Tommy Welling. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Fantastic, my friend. Excited to dive into today's conversation. We're going to be going into a 5-2 intermittent fasting meal replacement diet and glycemic control for adults with diabetes. This is coming out of the early randomized clinical trials. It was just released as an original investigation in the Journal of Diabetes and Endocrinology on June 21st of 2024. We are recording this on June 26th, which is really stinking cool. So it is cool. In JAMA. It's in the open network access, and the full PDF is available as well. So we'll dive into that in just a minute. If you are new to the podcast, then that was a mouthful. But welcome in. Thanks for giving us a shot to become part of your fasting journey and your lifestyle adaptation of living a fasting lifestyle. If you want to know more about Tommy, myself, our journey, head back all the way back to episode 1. It is a short, deep dive into our experience and how fasting has transformed our lives. And then from there, we've got 230 plus episodes where we will dive into research articles, lifestyle adaptation, application of a fasting lifestyle, the benefits, the pros, the cons, the ins, the outs, the nuance, and everything in between. So today we're going to go into this article and talk about what they did, why we find it interesting, and ultimately how we can apply it to you right now in today's moment, where you can take something out of this study and put it into your day-to-day life, take an action now and adapt into this fasting lifestyle. Because the question we get most often, Tommy, is what's the best fasting schedule? It's the same question as what's the best diet to lose weight? Well, the one you can stick to. So ultimately, our job here is to guide you on that journey. And that's what we've been doing week in and week out, why we have our resources, our 7-day Master Your Fasting challenges, the free resources on the website, and bringing you an episode each and every week. So if you're a long-term listener, thank you. We appreciate the downloads, the subscribes, the shares, the follows, the bookmarks, whatever the new thing is you do when you log into where you listen to your podcasts. We also appreciate the 5-star reviews.
Love them.
Tells us that we are doing good work and that we're providing value, as well as the podcast world that we're bringing the good. So Tommy,
sir,
as we dive into a 5-2 intermittent fasting meal replacement diet and glycemic control for adults with diabetes, the big picture here is what I love is that this study came out of China. And one of the initiatives in China is that they want to focus on lifestyle change. Now, I have no idea what being in China is like, but I'm sure it's vastly different than living here in the States. But they're focusing on lifestyle changes and not just treatment of diabetes. So reversal versus management, right? So I love that starting point that they want to change the lifestyle habits or the things that the lifestyle interventions instead of using the diabetic medications, which is 2 of the medications we'll talk about here in the study. So I just love that starting point, that the whole intention of this study was to see if we can get some lifestyle stuff first, rather than here's your medication, now go lose some weight.
Yeah. And as we start to adapt a little bit of lifestyle change, what do the metrics show? How does the blood work respond? What does the scale do? What's happening to the overall health of the patient, and putting that up against the standard of care in modern medicine. A couple of the modern mainstay medications that get used in type 2 diabetes versus what can we do when we start to implement some fasting, some form of fasting? And as we'll go over, a relatively small amount of fasting, so a small amount of lifestyle change, and how we can leverage that to see dramatic and lasting results.
100%. So when we look at these different groups, let's unpack a little bit. I don't want to bury the lead. So the reality is that the 5-2 meal replacement group showed considerable improvements, not just in A1C, but in almost doubled the weight loss. We'll get into the nitty gritty specifics. Getting A1C under 7%, blood pressure, triglycerides, HDL cholesterol, all were much greater. And interestingly enough, the adverse events, which is a fun part of the conversation, of the um, of the intervention group, as well as the compared to the two medication groups, the metformin group and the fasting group, the 5-2 meal replacement group, both had the same number of adverse events. But we're going to kind of dive into that a little bit, because the adverse event in the fasting group is actually a good thing.
Yeah.
It's just counterintuitive to the status quo from a medical standpoint in patients that have type 2 diabetes. So, didn't want to bury the lead on all the great things we're going to talk about, because the takeaway here is that there's a lot of power in the application and the starting point for someone that is trying to do lifestyle overhaul.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're a seasoned faster, great. Then you're doing a lot of good things that are going to prevent and or never having to have you worry about blood sugar issues or prediabetes or all the comorbidities and cofactors that go with that, which is one of the main drivers. Insulin and blood sugar issues is the main drivers of all cause mortality or lifestyle induced disease and all cause mortality here in the States, and now that we're seeing worldwide. So we want to nip that in the bud as soon as possible. But if you're someone that is on this path of metabolic dysfunction and blood sugar regulation issues, then this study should be very empowering to you, that if it's working for the patients that already have the condition to reverse it, then it can absolutely work for you to 100% prevent it, get the weight off for good, and prevent it rather than having to manage or reverse it in the future, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great point, because when we think about these things, we oftentimes hear about type 2 diabetes being managed. But
Right.
when we can really take a look at, well, what were the needle movers that actually caused the disease or that push the progression of it? Because it's not an on or off thing. Like you mentioned, we have pre-diabetes now and then diabetes, but there's
Right.
not just two stages of the disease. It's essentially on a gradient. And if we think about that, it starts to make a lot more sense that it develops over time, takes a long time to develop, but then it can actually be reversed. But that can take some time too. But even the reversal comes in layers as well. But when we start to move the needle for the main indicators of the disease, like how much excess body fat is stored, what do my insulin resistance numbers look like, what is my fasting glucose, what are my blood chemistry numbers looking like, then as I start to change those, then I can actually reverse the disease. So it's a really, really empowering study, and I'm really excited that they undertook it in this kind of way, because we haven't seen a design quite like this, where we take a little bit of fasting and put it up against some of the gold standard medications.
So the two gold standards, one you're probably going to be familiar with in terms of the naming mechanism, right? So it's metformin, right? So industry standard diabetes. My dad was on it for years. He was taking the highest dose possible, which is 2,000 milligrams a day. In this study, there were three different groups. One was the fasting and meal replacement group. We'll explain that in a second. One was the metformin group, and one was the epagliflozin group, which is known as Jardiance. So you'll know Jardiance in the commercials. By the way, one of the two countries in the world that actually can have direct pharmaceutical marketing direct to our homes over the cable and cord cutting airways.
Yep.
I always find that interesting. Not going down that rabbit hole, but metformin and then Jardiance. So in those groups, when we're looking at the three different characteristics, the meal replacement group, they followed the specific intermittent fasting plan and with a meal replacement. We'll talk about that in just a second. So the 5-2 fasting plan typically is 5 days of normal eating and then 2 days non-consecutive. We did a cool episode about a similar version of 5-2 fasting with consecutive days which was
Heck
really
yeah.
cool. We just did that article, that episode a few episodes ago. Can't remember the exact number, but it's in the 230s, right? So just go back a couple, you'll see it.
Yeah, getting that fast up. Yeah, that was a cool one.
It was. Yeah, it really was. So in this one, they're doing non-consecutive fasting days. And on these non-consecutive days, they're doing on this day, they're doing a replacement product A. Now, it doesn't tell us what is in the product A, but we do have some insights to it. So we'll talk about that in just a second. And that's about 500 kilocalories for women and 600 kilocalories for men. So they weren't eating, but they were having a meal replacement on those non-consecutive fasting days. And the other 5 days, they chose their breakfast and lunch. And then they had a meal replacement product B for dinner.
Okay.
The metformin group took the metformin medication, 0.5 grams twice daily, potentially up to that 2-gram level, depending on the severity of the diabetic, the blood sugar and the A1C. None of the A1Cs were above 9. That was one of the things that said, a limiting factor of this. Would this still extrapolate over into the higher A1Cs? In my belief, it truly would.
Yeah.
The
Probably
metformin
make
group didn't.
some of the results even more dramatic.
Yeah, I'd be like, well, if it works in this group, why wouldn't it work in the higher group, right? So I know we're taking liberties there, but the metformin group did not follow the 5-2 meal replacement plan, and the Jardiance group took the medication 10 milligrams once a day, right? And they also were not on the same plan, but all participants, regardless of the group, received dietary and exercise guidance. They received general diabetes education and specific instructions from nutritionists and research physicians in accordance with the guidelines every 4 weeks.
Okay. So a little bit of like almost nutrition, exercise, counseling, some of the basic information that you would probably get if you were recently diagnosed as a diabetic and probably put on some of these medications. Hey, these are some of the guidelines, some of the recommendations, but not specific prescriptions for how or when or what to eat or how or when or what to do as far as exercise is concerned either, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I like this because when we look at we'll talk about this in a second. I want to give a few more details and then percentages about the outcomes, and then we'll talk about the lifestyle application. And I think you worded it really well as we were prepping for this episode in terms of the practicality of adapting, of removing the barriers of resistance or the decreasing the threshold activation energy to stick to a lifestyle change.
Yeah.
Especially in the old dieting mindset, right? Now, fasting can be used as a diet too. It can be used as immediate caloric restriction because you're compressing your window of when you're going to bring in food and nutrients, right? But we don't want to have an on-off switch. We want to adapt it in that lifestyle. So we're going to talk about that application from this study in just a minute. A couple more points of clarity is the product A and product B, right? So the product B was done on the 5 days as a dinner replacement. And then the product A was either that 500 or 600 calorie shake. So when we look at these, it was the study contained omega-3 fatty acids and medium chain fatty acids, so healthy fats, that helped regulate leptin, which we know we just did an episode specifically on leptin and its role in insulin resistance and getting off of the craving food crazy train, right?
Yeah.
It inhibits fat synthesis and promotes fat breakdown. And then the MCTs reduce heterotropic fat, enhance brown fat thermogenesis, which is burning the visceral fat, and then increases your insulin sensitivity. So we don't have a lot of details on what these replacements were, but to me, that sounds like high fat, high protein.
Yeah.
Healthy fats, pretty much.
Healthy fats, some good protein in there. Keep the carbs lower. And at that point, we have good nutrition coming in without a super big blood sugar and insulin response, which is going to be helpful for the process as well. So we look for higher satiety factors and less likely to input more volatility into blood sugar swings and insulin swings, which means it's going to be promoting and supporting good fasting along with good food choices. So that's some of my liberties that I'm kind of taking here and what I would be doing if I was following this method right here.
The cool thing is that aligns with some of the exact principles that we teach in terms of applying this as a lifestyle, right? So let's talk about some of the specific differences or results that we saw. And then we'll get into the application. So there was a 3 month washout period after where they followed. And then
Hmm.
there was a couple of cool other articles that we've done, and one we're going to do in the future that support this outcome as well. Um, in terms of diabetes remission or getting your A1C down or some of the metrics we're about to mention. But the greatest reduction in A1C at 16 weeks was at 1.9% in the MR group. So the
Hmm.
fasting group, the 5-2 fasting group. Metformin was at 1.6 and Jardiance was at 1.5. So, like, okay, not crazy difference, right?
Sure.
Here's the cool part is the percent of patients that achieved an A1C less than 7%, almost 90% of those folks were in the fasting group. The metformin group was in the low 70s at 74%, and the
Hmm.
Jardiance group was at 70%.
Wow.
So
Phenomenal for the 5-2 group.
25 plus 15 to 20% difference
Hmm.
in the percentage of patients that actually achieved a lower A1C. So that's by far and away stood out. And then, yes, the MR group stood out as we expected, greater improvements, the fasting group and the meal replacement groups in improvements in blood pressure, triglycerides, HDL, far and away more statistically significant than the drug
Wow.
groups. And here's the kicker. So I'm not good at kilograms, right? But I know it's multiplied by 2.2. So the fasting MR, I'm not good at math on the fly, conversions. Um, the fasting group, 9.7 kilograms.
Wow.
The metformin and Jardiance group, 5.5 and 5.8.
Wow.
Whoa. Like,
Double.
that's
Double
double,
weight loss. Yeah. I mean, you're over 20 pounds there
right?
for the meal replacement for the 5-2 group. And I mean, that's 2 days a week with a shake, with a
With
well
actually not
balanced shake.
fasting. Can we just say it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some fasting in there, but nothing crazy. Nothing more than we're probably in the 18.6 range. We're probably in the 20-hour range to get, or maybe even a little less than that, to get to the shake. And then it's not even consecutive days here. But with consistency, though, those results are phenomenal, and that's without the support of those blood sugar lowering medications that were in the other two groups. And like, um, that's so promising right there.
Yeah, I want to come back to the adverse events, right? Because we're going to talk about that. There's a little nuance in there
Mm,
that the percentage of adverse events were the same in the metformin group and the 5-2 meal replacement fasting group.
yeah.
So we'll come back to that, but I want to frame this out big picture and talk lifestyle application here. So
Okay.
when we're looking at this study big picture, right, it's like, okay, well, it's not really back to back fasting. It's not extended fasting. It's short term fasting windows. It's being able to eat 2 meals a day and then have this meal replacement shake, high protein, high fat, all things we align with. But
Hmm.
ultimately, what I hear here and what I want you to unpack is this idea that, like, the little things matter,
Mm,
because most people that are going to start a diet go to the extreme: eat less, move more, biggest loser, right? Well, let me use
sure. Yeah.
fasting. Okay, great. I'm going to do a 7-day fast. Okay, cool. Uh, Great. Simple in concept, maybe not so easy in execution, depending on
Mm,
where your starting point is, or where your experience level is, or where your mental state is, right? Or where your support system is. But
sure.
ever feel like anyone out there in the podcast world, like anyone out there ever feel like, man, I got to start over? Or I'll just give up because it's not perfect? Or,
Mm,
man, I wish I could just be more disciplined when it comes to this stuff? Or, I set my timer, but then I gave in, or I pivoted, I freelanced my way. I ended up eating when I had my timer set, or I didn't set my timer and I forgot, or I'll
mm,
start again on Monday. Right.
yeah. I'm not sure if this fasting thing is for me.
Right. So just look at the starting point of these folks. Already diabetics, already have blood sugar issues, already have more cravings and leptin imbalances and insulin
Sure.
resistance, right?
Overweight. Hmm.
Overweight, probably been on the dieting roller coaster for a while, right? And the small changes that they made resulted in huge changes in their blood chemistry and in their ability to reverse blood sugar issues like diabetes.
Yeah, and this is promising. These methods are promising no matter where you are on that scale, or even if you don't have much weight to lose, or if you're not diabetic but you're looking to take more control or maintain a level of control. Because we get that question a lot too, which is like, I already got the weight off, but how do I maintain a level of control? This is a cool way to do it, where the adaptability to your lifestyle is so much greater here in this method than it is in other things. Like, I mean, I've literally heard some people say, well, I'd like to just do maybe a 5-day fast, once a month, or something else along those lines to kind of maintain my control. And I'm thinking to myself, that's a high level of volatility right there, because the longer the fast, the more volatility. If you want to maintain results, you want something that's easier to be very consistent with, rather than more extreme and less frequent like that, because then you're going to have to feel like you're kind of starting that process over, or you're going from 0 to 100. I'd much rather go from 0 to 3, like we do in this study here, which is the adaptability of a 5-2 diet, where you pick 2 days out of the week and you go, okay, on those days, either those are full fasting days, or maybe they're healthy, nutritious, single mini meal days, if you will. They don't have to be a shake necessarily, but it could be a well-designed mini meal. And that adaptability right there, with the level of reduced pressure that you have on your physiological symptoms, on your fasting blood sugar, on your insulin response, on your liver, on your blood chemistry, triglycerides, HDL, LDL, the everything has less pressure on it than when food and fuel are consistently coming in all throughout the day, every single day of the week. So just backing off of that a couple of times a week in a very strategic but consistent way is incredibly effective for all of those metrics that we've discussed.
And I see two use cases here too, right? So you're lacking consistency. Maybe you've fallen off and you're coming back to fasting. Maybe I just saw a post in our Facebook community,
Mm-hmm.
our free Facebook community, where somebody was like, "Yeah, I lost between 2 years ago, I lost like 80 pounds and I gained it all back." Right. And they're
Mm,
like, "All right, well, I'm doing a long 7-day fast, but the weight loss is stalled. So what do I
sure.
do? Like, I can't get consistency again." Well, go back to the basics. This is a
Yeah.
starting point for anyone, if you're an experienced faster or not. Simply eat 2 meals, replace the third meal with high protein and fat.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually go down to one meal with the meal replacement. If you're struggling to get longer fasts, add in a protein fat shake, right?
Mm-hmm.
The result matters. We don't need to become dogmatic or give ourselves lashings for not fitting somebody else's definition of what a fasting lifestyle looks like.
Sure. Yeah.
Go jump in a lake. I'm going to do it my way. The result is what matters, right? So adapting. Now, if you're wanting all of the benefits of fasting, yes, we've had conversations about clean fasting versus dirty fasting, or water fasting versus dry fasting, or
Mm,
or fast cycling, which is what we teach inside of our challenges and inside of our coaching programs, right? Is how to make
mm,
this and adapt it into a lifestyle. But the reality is, we don't talk that much about fasting windows and timers. We talk more about all of the lifestyle stuff, the application stuff, right?
yeah. The things that really
So,
get in the way.
yeah, the things that really matter in terms of sustainability. So that's what I love
Mm,
about this study, is that they were looking at moderate to severe diabetic situations. We're looking at standard of care changes where we want to use lifestyle on the front end rather than going direct to medication. And encourage y'all that if you're on some of these meds, and you can apply this same thought process to blood pressure medication, and this is my disclaimer, this is not medical advice, but if you're on blood pressure and cholesterol meds and you're like, man, I just don't want to be on this. Okay, well, what's going to make the change? Not another medication or a doctor visit, but you making some lifestyle change.
yeah.
And you're going to get the benefits of all of these different interventions, of all of these different markers, by putting in simple, sustainable fasting approaches, which is why I love the meal replacement thing here, even though we don't know what's in it, but you can make your own favorite smoothie or coffee. What's that Dave Asprey,
Oh,
bulletproof
like a
coffee,
bulletproof.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Sure.
Fat,
That has some MCTs in there right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
and add in
Add a
some
little bit of
collagen or a
collagen.
protein. Yeah, boom,
Ah,
you got a mocha protein fat bomb shake. Cool, if
yeah.
that works for you.
A little element, little,
Right.
I would do like a chocolate caramel element in there. Boom.
Oh, gross. Have it with a side of watermelon. So another cool study was in 2023. This is one that we're going to do a full episode on. Is that 47% of intermittent fasting participants achieved diabetes remission?
Mm,
This had a short lag time of 3-month follow up, But this study that we're going to do a full deep dive on had at 12 months had a 44%. It's only a 3% attrition rate,
Wow.
right? In people achieving and keeping that remission,
Incredible.
right? And then there was another study in 2022 that found intermittent fasting significantly improves blood glucose and lipid levels, as well as insulin resistance with patients that have metabolic syndrome. So the step before, you might have some blood sugar issues or diabetes, pre-diabetes or diabetes, right?
Yeah.
So what I love about this idea is that it's manageable, right? That it's gradual, that it allows you to make better decisions about your food, that it allows you to focus on hydration, that it allows you to monitor your progress, this type of lifestyle,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Go
And
ahead.
I don't even think we mentioned the fasting plasma glucose concentration reduction and how it was superior in the 5-2
I
MR
didn't.
group as
I
well.
must have missed that one.
Yeah, it was up to almost 40 points in fasting glucose reduction. It was better than the
What?
metformin and better than the Jardiance as well. And so,
Oh,
I
Tommy,
mean,
this is a perfect segue. Go ahead.
yeah, yeah. So when you're coming into this and you go, um, you say, well, what issues am I experiencing right now? What am I actually trying to take control over? Fasting blood glucose and morning blood glucose, which is the easiest way for most of us to get a pulse on what our fasting blood glucose is one of those major needle movers. And so just the fact that the 5-2 meal replacement group had the best movement of that important metric is incredible right here.
That's a perfect segue when we're into the adverse event category, right? Because you
Mm,
just said a 40-point reduction in blood glucose levels, right?
yeah.
And there's this fear, and there's a type 1 diabetic coach out there who has fear, getting over your fear of low blood sugar levels, right? Because
Mm,
if you're suppressing, right, or there's always this concern and this fear around diabetic ketoacidosis as well, where you've got high blood sugar and high ketone production, right? Because your body
right.
isn't producing, or the effectiveness of the insulin isn't working.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is, oh, we hear this all the time. My blood sugar went too low. Ah, okay. Well, is that an adverse event? Are those blood sugar levels actual optimal, or are they just reference ranges for disease
Mm,
processes?
yeah.
So, what did the NIH say was the level, Tommy?
70
70.
milligram per deciliter.
Right. I don't know about any of you that have been fasting, but if you're on blood pressure lowering medications, and that's only when you have to worry about your blood pressure going too low from an external source, because your body has defense mechanisms built in place
Mm.
to stop your blood sugar from going too low.
Okay, blood
Right.
sugar. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, I mean, when you're fasting, people will have this concern or this fear around going too low, or if you've got a CGM on, right, and it goes rah, 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 and the alarm goes off, right?
Yeah. Our Keto Mojo gives you a little apple core
Yeah.
symbol.
Yeah. The reality is that a bad thing when you're getting insulin down and then you're tapping into fat? And then, these support shakes that this study used actually were
Mm,
supposed to inhibit fat growth and stimulate fat burning, right? And fat oxidation and brown fat activation as well. Like those are all good things when it comes to burning the body fat and the visceral fat that becomes a metabolically active tissue, right? So
mm,
when we're looking at the um, the adverse events, there's this chart in the study, and it says 8 individuals had hypoglycemic symptoms in the fasting group, and 8 individuals had 8 out of about 135 had um, hypoglycemia in the metformin group.
mm,
Right now, the other adverse events that had taken place in these groups were the metformin group had the most at 36 total out of 134 and 134. The Jardiance had 11 out of 136, and the fasting meal replacement group, the 5-2 group, had 9 total. 8 of them were low blood sugar. Right now, if we look at some of the other one constipation, excuse me. So 8 low blood sugar and 1 constipation in the fasting group.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't the point to lower the blood sugar, right? So in the Jardiance group, they only had 11 total, so just 2 more than the fasting group. And there
Mm-hmm.
was severe elevated blood ketones, and what in this rash, which is what we've extrapolating out is probably a keto rash. If you're familiar in the fasting space, that's something that can happen sometimes. And then they had uh, urinary tract issues, and then 1 reported thirst, right? So not as severe, but we did have those 2 serious events,
Mm-hmm.
that didn't happen in the metformin group or the fasting group. Small sample
Sure.
size, of course. But
Of course.
then we look at the metformin group, and you've got nausea, diarrhea, abdominal pain, loss of appetite, headache, fatigue, like a whole host of side effects. Never mind, I would like to see muscle aches, because that's what my dad had when he was on it. He had a lot of
Mm.
muscle pain
Oh, wow.
and chronic inflammation too.
That's tough
So
because that makes you feel more sedentary as well. It makes you not really want to get up and get moving anymore, which can worsen the problem and lengthen the area under the curve for post eating blood sugar and insulin responses as well.
it defeats the purpose of trying to overhaul a lifestyle, right? Because,
For sure.
you're going to want to walk, you're going to want to move, you're going to want to use those tools of walking post meal, right? Or walking shorter intermittent walks throughout the day to help manage blood sugar and tap into fat loss.
Mm-hmm.
There's another study we're going to do coming up in the future, if we haven't done it already, because we've done a lot, but it's about fast walking and fasting, right? So, in terms of low intensity, steady state cardiovascular exercise, walking is better than running or jogging or any of those things. So,
Wow. Nice.
we want you to move. So that, again, these side effects, right? And this comes back to the main purpose and conclusion of this study, which is why we really wanted to talk about it. Small things matter. You got to start somewhere. Let's get the biggest bang for your buck with the least amount of activation energy or mindset shift or change initially. We don't want to make big swinging changes. We want to make small, sustainable changes. And most importantly, they say it in the conclusion, the 5-2 meal replacement may serve as an initial lifestyle intervention for patients with type 2 diabetes, providing an alternative to the use of metformin and Jardiance, which is that why we wanted to have that side effect and kind of nuanced conversation around, well, is low blood sugar actually a side effect?
Yeah.
Well, I'd rather take that than the Jardiance, or definitely than the metformin group, who had the whole host of other issues that came along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the design of this study with using 5-2 meal replacement is so much more approachable, especially if you're farther along in the blood sugar related issues or diabetes or prediabetes. The farther you are along with that, and the more quickly you jump into, let's say, a longer fast, like you mentioned, a 7-day fast earlier, that can be a real big swing. And then that's where some of the real discomfort of some of those symptoms can come about, especially being on blood sugar lowering medications. But it was interesting to me that in the 5-2 MR group, those 8 individuals who were hypoglycemic, that was actually hypoglycemic symptoms. It wasn't even measured as hypoglycemia.
Right,
So
right.
I'm going to take a liberty here and say that a lot of those symptoms may have actually been related to the drop in insulin, which led to an excretion of salt, and then actually could have been low salt symptoms rather than low sugar, because they didn't actually even have a depressed blood sugar reading. So shout out to using salt, things like Element or like a Redmond salt, or a Himalayan salt, especially when you're getting into fasting, because you're going to see that drop in the salt, and you can experience symptoms with that, but it doesn't necessarily always mean that it's low blood sugar, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And I'd forgotten that we had thought through that too. So when you're looking at this, right, we're talking big picture lifestyle change prevention, rather than, you may not have diabetes. Maybe you were like me and had undiagnosed diabetes, right? You were doing all the tests, hired a $10,000 functional nutritionist here in Houston, went down the functional medicine pathway,
Mm.
couldn't figure it out until we're like, oh, wait a minute, let me get my fasted insulin tested. And I was like, holy moly, okay, here we go. And this was after doing the calorie counting and tracking and macros and CrossFit and all of the stuff that I had tried and gotten keto and intermittent fasting until that day we talked in your kitchen on Father's Day. Is that 4 years ago now? Yeah. So no, 5 years ago now. Coming up on 5 years. Wow, we just passed 5 years.
5 years, yeah.
How have we not run out of stuff to talk about? It's incredible. So if you're looking for support, looking to take action, get plugged in, sign up for the next challenge. If you're ready to take and really accelerate that learning curve, head to the show notes. You can also grab the Blueprint to Fasting for Fat Loss. That will give you some more guidelines on how we implement fasting as a lifestyle, some of the science, some of the who, what, when, where, and why, and a little bit of the how we like to do it and how we recommend it. And then it's pretty much got something for everybody inside of that 20-page PDF. It'll email over to you. You can head to our website, click the resources tab. We've got the fasting journal, the insulin assessment, the waist height ratio calculation, things you can take control of in your day-to-day life. Or you can head over to the Facebook community as well, which is where we break the first 2 rules of fasting 24/7, which is we talk about fasting and we talk about fasting. So
absolutely.
Tommy, as we wrap up today, man, appreciate the conversation. I really feel like this is going to land for the majority of folks, no matter where you are in your fasting journey. And we will talk to you soon.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.
So, you've heard today's episode, and you may be wondering, where do I start? Head on over to thefastingforlife.com and sign up for our newsletter, where you'll receive fasting tips and strategies to maximize results and fit fasting into your day-to-day life.
While you're there, download your free Fast Start guide to get started today. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review, and we'll be back next week with another episode of Fasting for Life.